The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster by. Good afternoon, welcome to Mannin Line. This final day of November 2023. A constituency MHK Mannin Line today from Rushen. Dr. Michelle Haywood, elected in 2021, is with us. And Juan Watterson, Speaker of the House of Keys, first elected in 2006. So if there's anything you want to ask, anything you'd like to speak to the two MHKs about, by all means, text, email, call and WhatsApp. The floor is yours with Russian MHKs today on Mannin Line. Michelle Haywood, Faster Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's a wee while since we sat in Port Erin railway station prior to that. So if you'd known then what you know now, would you still have done it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's been the best adventure ever. It's every day is different. Every day is something I'd not expected to have to deal with, and I'm loving it.
Okay. Were you at the meeting last night?
I was. Okay.
What was your opinion of the meeting, the mood of the meeting?
I think the mood of the meeting was kind of split. There is a definite a sort of cohort that will oppose the wind farms and have real concerns about it, and they got their chance to have their say. And I think there were other people who'd come along just to hear what it was about and to understand a bit more, and to try and see what opinions they might form of it.
Can you see a way through this? Can you see the future?
Yes, I can see a way through it. I can see that actually all of those concerns that people have, the next stage is the environmental impact assessment, and that's what is designed to look at all of those concerns. And so we're just going into the scoping period of that project now, which is about sort of setting out what do we think we need to look at and what do we think the impacts will be. This is the time for all of those voices to be heard.
This is the meeting. Juan Watterson, Faster Mike, good afternoon. You were at the meeting last night?
Indeed, yes.
150 odd people there, organised by the commissioners. Chief Minister there, Manx Utilities Chief Exec, Philip King was there as well. And again, Michelle said the feeling is split in this. Does it have to be split as far as you're concerned?
Well, that was certainly what was the meeting last night. The mood of the meeting last night was definitely one that was split. I mean, we heard from people both for and against them. Both sides were getting sort of good rounds of applause. It wasn't dominated one side, although there were certainly more concerns raised than sort of positive points made. That's probably in the nature of a public meeting, though. But it was interesting to hear constituents and ones from Arbury and what further afield talking about their issues and their concerns, but also to hear from young person to say this is my future and this is something that I think has to happen. So there was really a good balance and breadth of issues raised.
Do you have a personal view on it?
We definitely went along last night to sort of sit and listen. I don't think I know everything yet. No one knows everything about it, but I'm still definitely in listening mode. I want to sort of hear all the arguments, and I'm definitely interested in reading the environmental impact assessment before I press a green or red button in Tynwald.
Okay, Howard, Faster My. Howard, good afternoon. You're live with
Michelle and Mr. Speaker. Just a question, and I see it often enough on the internet and in the local papers. The introduction of the wind turbines and the money that's quoted as going to cost for this is 23 million. Now, even the layman would know that those 5, or in the photographs I've seen 6 turbines, 23 million is an insignificant amount of money, because like lots of other government schemes, they'll have add-ons, and some of the add-ons will be getting them ashore. They'll have to have facilities, getting them to the venues, and strengthening the roads to accommodate the heavy vehicles, and of course the heavy cranes is going to get here. Now, there's no mention of any of that within the pricing that the MUA, or whatever they call themselves today, the 23 million won't cover anywhere near what is needed to put 5 turbines up. So why are they concealing the ultimate cost of this? If they put it out to the public and say this is going to cost 90 to 100 million, it would make people's train of thoughts change.
Michelle Haywood?
I can pick up on quite a bit of that, actually. So, good afternoon. And I think there's lots of things still being worked up on this project. It's not likely to be 5 or 6 turbines. In fact, it may be as low as 3. It just depends on the scale of the turbines that you go for. So that is still in, as part of the impact assessment, that's still being worked through. The current plan to bring the blades ashore actually doesn't involve constructing any infrastructure. It involves bringing them alongside the airport and taking them up the runway. And then there is a roads plan. Now, they use vehicles that have multiple axles, and so the weight is spread over. So although these turbine blades are heavy, the weight will be spread across, effectively creating like a much sort of more even load on the road. And there have been assessments done even to the point of where the water mains sit below a road and what could happen. At the moment, the plan then is that those components would travel along, and they travel along the south coast along Shore Road, and then they'd turn and they'd move up that way. So I think there are lots of things that could add to the cost, and you're right to be concerned about that. I think the 23 million is not a figure that I necessarily come across. I come across nearer 40 million, but those things are still to be worked out, and it depends on the size of the turbines, the size of the blades, the exact weight and the routing that you take as to what those things look like. But I know that these are being looked at.
Howard?
Yeah, this is it's another one of false information that's coming out from within the nest. Make that look good. 23 million, that sounds wonderful. But what you've just said now are main roads that have been constructed to take substantial weight. But you're talking about putting these wind turbines up in the hills where there's only small, narrow roads and lightweight roads, B roads, what we call, and they will be hard-pressed to take the weight of these vehicles. And as I say, the cranes, they're going to have to be large cranes. If you see anything where these wind turbines are constructed in anywhere else in the world besides here, they do have very, very heavy vehicles. And I know they say they put them up in Scotland, but those roads will have to be maintained so that other vehicles can get up to the wind turbines. And as I say, it's deceptive to say and to quote figures like the government have been doing, and then we're going to end up with another Liverpool landing stage, which is going to be 3 and 4 times the amount. It seems to be a regular feature now, even when they built the hospital. That was quoted as 40-odd million and ended up 3 times, 4 times the price. Fine, we needed one. Liverpool landing stage, the extension to the airport, all these different things, they quote silly, low figures, and the government think that the public are gullible, and they are to a degree. I'm one of them. But it's us that's paying for them, and it's us that's going to have to pay for them for a long, long time to come.
Juan Watterson?
Well, I can agree with some of what you said, and certainly there was what we've described in the Public Accounts Committee report as optimism bias, and it's a plague across public sector projects, especially big, complicated projects, and we've seen in the UK experiences that you can expect to add about 50% on to complicated projects. This is slightly less complicated. I mean, you mentioned the hospital there, and looking at colleagues in Jersey who are looking to $500 million to $1 billion for their replacement hospital. I think we got in at the right time. In terms of the cost, I think the cost figures that have come out, I haven't read that 23 million that you've cited, Howard, but 40 million is the figure that's certainly been kicking around at Tynwald. Wouldn't be surprised if that did go up to 50 million, but even at sort of 60 million, if it went up as high as that, I think it still has a positive payback period from an economic perspective. The roads, I think the heaviest component they were talking about was 90 tonnes, and the way of bringing that through, it will be A roads all the way. It'll be along the coast road from the airport, up past Rushen Primary School, and then up Ballaclowie, and then there would need to be a track built from the Slough Road to actually site the turbines and all the equipment. So they are A roads all the way. So that shouldn't be the biggest problem logistically that's faced. I think there are plenty of others.
Do you just a moment, Howard? Do you appreciate the public's concern when they hear figures quoted, which they know inevitably will creep up as well? So is there any merit in just giving people the figure? This is the maximum it may be.
Well, that's certainly how you'd expect the vote in Tynwald to be, up to a maximum of. But we have found that the constant optimism bias is not something that's unique to the Isle of Man. And certainly, as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, we've got some recommendations in January about sort of trying to make some of these estimates far more realistic from the get-go, because it is known that this is a common feature, not just here but across. It doesn't mean that it's acceptable, and it does lead to massive amounts of frustration from the taxpayer. So that's something that the PAC has definitely had an eye on the last couple of years.
Okay, final word, Howard?
It was just in the same context. Now, either of your guests today can correct me on this, but was it recently said that projects £1 million or over will have to go through Tynwald, etc.? So suddenly we've just got one, what they term as quite a serious construction, is the promenade, and it's nicely placed £900,000. It's like going into a shop and you're buying something for $9.99. It's still a tenner. And are they going to keep doing this now and putting these projects that they've got under the £1 million, so we sneak through and then a few little bits added on afterwards, so it will bring it up to what would have to go through Tynwald for questioning? Okay,
Juan, what is it?
No, it's not the case that all projects over £1 million can get approved by Tynwald. The budgeting system for the Isle of Man government is far worse than that. There's no requirement for pretty much any scheme to come through Tynwald at all. A lot of it gets shoved into what we lovingly call column 2 of the budget, which means if you vote for the budget, you voted for everything in it, including all these programmes. So one of those, for example, was £20 million on smart meters for the Manx Utilities Authority. Okay, you could say it was definitely needed, but Tynwald didn't get a separate debate and vote on that, and that's quite a significant scheme. So there's an awful lot, and it's been a bugbear of mine for the last 17 years. I'm still banging on about it in terms of budget reform, but making it far more transparent and having members being able to pick up individual capital projects and have them scrutinised and have government answer questions on them and being able to vote on them is something that I think is absolutely critical in a modern functioning democracy.
Okay, all right, thanks, Howard. Good to hear from you. I want to go on to David, who's with us now. Hi, David.
Hi, Andy. I'm just wondering whether your guests have seen the BBC website when it's reporting on the field in the offshore in Mackle and for Orsted, and they said they can provide all the Isle of Man's electricity needs if they build these wind turbines offshore, and they could complete them if they get the go-ahead by 2030. Now, what I know is why you're gambling maybe £50 million of taxpayers' money to have onshore when Orsted are going to do it for nothing and pay us for the seabed.
Okay, Michelle Haywood?
So Orsted aren't actually going to make a decision about that project until 2029. So I
2029?
2029. At the moment, they're busy going through all of the scoping and working up to doing the environmental impact assessments.
Partnering with the Department of Education.
So they won't be making a decision. I don't think that that's intended to be functional until probably 2032, but we do have commitments to try and reduce our carbon emissions. And I think one of the things that's being missed about the wind turbine project is if it runs as expected, it will save us of the order of £10 million a year that we spend on gas. And so unlike
this is the southern wind farm.
So if you get onshore wind running, it saves you a massive amount in terms of what you have to do in gas. On a windy day in the summer, those turbines will provide all of the island's summer energy demand. In winter, it'll be a third of our demand will be covered by that. And so every year, we're not having to buy gas in a very volatile market where the gas prices have been soaring and don't show any signs of coming back down, because every time you think they're going to, something else happens in the world and it pushes energy prices up again. And so it disconnects us from that volatile energy market. And unlike the other capital projects, this is actually a project that does have the potential to displace our spend, so we're not having to pay out.
David, sorry.
The other thing, of course, is that
sorry.
we'll own it. The one in the south of the island, or an onshore project on the Isle of Man, is something that MUA will own, and therefore isn't then going to be beholden to future energy price fluctuations, the commercial world, and I suppose there's also the technical issues about bringing that sort of volume of electricity into the Isle of Man grid as well, which is something that was quite a way away in terms of being able to take it on the Manx grid for us as well.
Okay, all right, David?
Yes, if you're going to make £10 million saved a year, you're gambling that these things, which are now going to be the MEA's property, are never going to fail. And if one of the blades or one of the turbines go, you've now got to get this massive crane back to Derby Haven, to Castletown Beach. You've got to get it onto the runway. You've got to take it up the mountain. You've got to assemble it. And you think that company is going to come back for one turbine blade when they're building hundreds and hundreds of units in the UK?
Okay, Michelle Haywood.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? The wind turbines are a really well-established technology. It's actually very reliable technology.
I mean, is there any sort of appreciable failure rate for wind turbines?
No, not at any scale. And and in the same way that you'll see the videos from the internet of blades cracking or the nacelle catching fire or whatever, that happens even in normal power stations that you get fires and blades. And I appreciate that the access things are difficult here on shore. But imagine how much more difficult it would be if we tried to do that offshore as well. And so, it really does take a specialist company to be able to run offshore wind, which is not where the Isle of Man's at. And as Juan said, the costs associated with it are so high that it's eye-watering sums that we'd have to talk about.
Okay. David?
Andy, yes, please, just before we go. I can't see the logic there. If you're telling me that a company is going to provide us with electricity offshore, why are you saying that it's going to cost the taxpayer to repair these? They're not ours to repair. The offshore ones will be Ørsted's. The one onshore will be the MEA's. So one will be maintenance free because it's not our property. The other one, if they fail, the £10 million you're going to save per year would be wiped out forevermore.
But does it affect your calculations, David, the fact that Ørsted couldn't do it for another 6 years?
Well, I can't see that because I read this report this week on the BBC. I mean, this is the Manx government telling us that Ørsted aren't ready. Ørsted hasn't said that.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, David. I just want to go, Juan Watterson, you were talking about the MUA and us owning this as well. So, can you give us any idea of the accountancy in this, where the figures fit in as to who owns what?
Well, I mean, the one at Erie Stane, the government owns the land, the government would build the turbines, and the government would then be able to, MUA would be able to reap the rewards and pass those on to the consumer, because it's just a taxpayer-owned company. Where David said about electricity brought from offshore would be maintenance free. No, it wouldn't. The maintenance costs would be higher, and they would be factored into the price that we paid for the electricity, along with profit. And maintaining onshore will be cheaper than offshore, and of course the MUA is not in the business of making a profit, sadly, but it's about making sure it's got the right level of output and the right price for the consumer, because it's taxpayer funded, so it's not there to try and make a return and give it out to shareholders.
Okay, and the fact that this will be effectively state owned, it'll be government owned, publicly owned if you like, is this going to stymie any other operations on the Isle of Man? Let's say Mr. Whittaker's operation at Bilown, or the ambitious project at Andreas as well. If these operate, will there be enough room for all sorts of operators?
Absolutely there will. And this is just one part of the MUA's sort of wider plan and the energy policy, which is yet to come to Tynwald, but they're looking at a mix of solar and other wind, and this is only to take us up to 2030, and there's still an awful lot of gaps to fill between then and trying to bridge the gap all the way up to sort of the 73 megawatts of winter peak demand that we need to get to. So this is going to be an ongoing journey all the way out to 2050.
Michelle Haywood, did anybody mention Kroger last night at the meeting?
No, I didn't. No, they didn't actually last night. It did get mentioned earlier in the day at some of the drop-in sessions because the MUA had got their consultants over, so they've run several drop-in sessions over the last couple of days. Okay. And I know it's been mentioned there.
What's your opinion of the Kroger situation?
I think they agreed their original licence terms, which was a sensible way of working, which required that they should have done the environmental impact assessments and the 3D seismic before they drilled. And I am very nervous about them going straight for drilling.
When they talk about telephone numbers in terms of revenue for the Isle of Man. Do you believe that?
Believe it when we see it.
Believe it when it appears. I think there's lots of the geologists that I've spoken to who will dispute the interpretation that they've got, and I think you were talking about optimism bias, optimism bias, and I think there's quite a bit of that in how they're assessing the data and how they're explaining that to people.
And Juan Watterson, your view of Kroger?
Well, of course, there's an optimism bias there as well, because they need to raise the capital in order to do the drilling and put the infrastructure in place. I don't have any philosophical objection to Kroger, but as I say, I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay, we're live with the Rushen MHKs, Juan Watterson and Michelle Haywood, and you can call on 66 13 68, text 166 177, email studio@manxradio.com.
Save over a third on festive centrepiece joints at ShopRite. An easy-to-carve turkey breast joint that's a delicious alternative to a whole bird, now only £3 per pound. Or a succulent unsmoked boneless Danish gammon joint, just £2.70 per pound. Roast, glaze or slow cook for a delicious crowd pleaser. How about a rind-on pork loin joint for the crispiest crackling at only £2.25 per pound? Can't make up your mind? Why not buy all three? Festive meat savers now in at ShopRite.
Spectrum Windows. If your house needs a new look and your windows let in rain, keep those cold breezes out and make it look like new again. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Quality through and through. Great work guaranteed to you. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Spectrum Windows.
I've just called the Guernsey Bank, Skipton International, about our savings.
And did you get a helpful robot?
No. At Skipton International, you speak to a very helpful, real person.
That's refreshing these days.
Well, that's why I chose them, for the perfect combination of personal customer service and some of the best savings rates. All by calling 01481 730 730 or visit skiptoninternational.com.
Skipton International is licensed to take deposits by the Guernsey Financial Services Commission and is a participant in the Guernsey Banking Deposit Compensation Scheme. Details at dcs.gg. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever your business, whatever its size, you can always rely on the island's leading fuel and oil supplier to keep you moving. Ellen Mannin Fuels, powering the island and powering industry. Call us on 844 000.
After late heartbreak last Saturday, FC Isle of Man will be out to get back on track when they take to the ball once more this weekend. The Ravens will be hunting points up against their latest visitors, Squires Gate, with the Manx side searching for their first win over the Blackpool-based side. Join me, Rob Pritchard and Tony Mepham for FC Isle of Man versus Squires Gate, kicking off this Saturday at 6 p.m. Manx Radio will be providing full live match commentary on our DAB and AM 1368 channels. Live coverage of FC Isle of Man on Manx Radio is supported by Selton, investing in our community.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Bonzo's live with Michelle Haywood and Juan Watterson. Hi, Bonzo.
Hello, hi there, Andy, and Michelle, and hi there, Juan.
Hey, Bonzo.
Hi. Yes, some of Howard's information again. I think there's a lot of disinformation, misunderstanding coming around about the onshore wind project. Firstly, the costings. Now, the costings, I believe, are available on a table in a piece of the Manx Utilities website on sustainable energy. That's what I seem to remember it being anyway. And it produces a number of options. It doesn't produce a 3-turbine option, but it talks about an optimal idea of a 4-turbine solution with 4 5-megawatt turbines. And that is the £23 million solution because, well, wind power is, roughly speaking, about £1 million a megawatt. But I think you get economies of scale and a bit of a discount. If you buy 3 big ones, it's going to be cheaper than 5 smaller ones, or 4 big ones rather than 5 or 6 smaller ones. And the estimates for that seem to have gone down. The highest estimate, I think, was 40 million, but I think that was for 6 turbines. that this 4-turbine plan is firstly cheaper, secondly lower visual impact, and it seems to be reducing in cost, because I think one of the plans for the 4-turbine solution would be if the turbine blades and assemblies could actually be brought from Douglas, which may be a possibility, I believe, by the construction of the completion of the Ballasalla bypass and the Balsane Road roundabout.
And do you think we should go full steam ahead with this project, Bonzo?
Well, absolutely, because it will produce savings, and it will produce very big savings very fast. The thing about the wind power, placing up a wind array, is that the actual putting up of it is pretty damn quick. Most of the time that is needed is in things like environmental impact assessments and going through planning. The actual work of putting up the poles and getting it operational is merely a few months. And of course, at that cost, and even if the cost inflated a little, but I can't imagine it going really much more, over about 25 million from that option. With that, a £10 million saving of gas a year, well, the thing pays for itself in 2 and a bit years. And that is the key thing I think that people have to remember about this wind turbine array, in that firstly it will stabilise the price of electricity, right? So we're not going to be so affected by external issues of the gas price going up and our electricity prices going up suddenly. We've got that wind power coming in, which allows us to throttle back the turbines and save all that gas.
Okay, now what about offshore wind energy? What do you think we should do about that?
Oh, well, I've been campaigning for that for donkey's years, and if we hadn't have had such an obstructive approach by DEFRA in the previous administration, it would have happened.
Okay, let me just put that to Juan Watterson then. Bonzo's talked at length about the fact that we first talked about offshore wind farms in 1997. And how come, has Tynwald been standing in the way of it?
I don't think so. I don't think the Department of Infrastructure and its predecessors have ever really got its act together with marine spatial planning, which is the bit the planning process, if you like, for anything that happens at sea. That regime is still not in place today. So it's really, we're not really geared up for it in legislative terms for granting those sort of permissions, and that's a bit of the frustration. But I suppose it's never been top of the priority list for legislation, because it's never been quite so tangible, it's never been quite so close as it is now. So I think there is a renewed emphasis on marine spatial planning, although we're still yet to see a draft bill or a consultation come out of the DOI, as far as I'm aware.
So if Ørsted wanted to go, if in 2029 or before they said we'd like to go ahead, is the legislative framework there? Is everything ready just to add water?
No, it's not. No, it really isn't. And I mean, it's not necessarily a complicated thing. There's plenty of other marine spatial planning bits of legislation from Ireland, from the UK, that we could quite happily go and steal and adapt to our own purposes. But it's just a piece of work that's going to have to happen before offshore wind or any other offshore development, and it's just not there yet.
Okay, a final word, Bonzo.
Yeah, the delay from Ørsted saying that they can't really start the project until 2029, that's not so much our end, that's the UK end, because there are issues with the national grid accepting the power from new wind farm developments. And Ørsted, I believe, with this development are way, way, way down a list. There's 158 or something to actually get the connection. So it would be a question of they couldn't do it economically until they could get the additional connection.
Okay.
So it's not our issue.
And the other thing that's talked about is trying to bring that onshore to the Isle of Man. Of course, we just don't have a grid that could accept that sort of quantity of electricity either, in terms of bringing it in here and then distributing it out down the interconnector.
Okay, all right, thanks. Good to hear from you, Bonzo. Here's a message in from Skell, this is, for both of you. How many more years does Port St Mary have to put up with the worst main road in the Isle of Man? We've been fobbed off for years. Is it because we don't have the required skill set to do the job, or because it's not on the TT, Michelle Haywood?
We have been battling this one, I think, well, before the election. I was doing it when I was on the Commissioners. We met 2 weeks ago with the DOI Minister and a list of things. We were promised by the previous DOI Minister that this was high on the list for funding, and it was the quote only capital project that his department were putting forward into the new capital project scheme. That clearly didn't happen at the time.
No. And
we're still waiting, but we are keeping the pressure up.
Yeah, there was money in the budget in February for designing the scheme. The scheme was designed in August. We were, as I say, originally told that it would be in this financial year. We've had a meeting with officers who have said that it isn't, and frankly, that was not what we were either expecting or wanted to hear. So meeting with the Minister was a fairly robust exchange of views on that one as to the Department's funding priorities, and we will be going back to see him in the very near future to talk further about this. But they've had the design money. I say the design's done. It's now about getting the funding in order to actually do the work, and it's long overdue. It must be one of the
For
worst.
the unenlightened, where is the road? Exactly.
This is Port St Mary High Street. So from the Albert up to, more accurately, the bit from Quine and Cubban up to the end of that sort of one-way system in Port St Mary. That's where we're talking about. So it's only 150 yards of
Which
road.
would cost how much?
Right, it's a substantial reconstruction. So it was the first part of the Irish scheme was laid through there, and the backfill that happened over that wasn't up to standard. That's what's caused the road to collapse. To actually work on that road, the whole road had to be closed off, and we know that several of the houses along there have cellars and everything like that. It is a complicated piece of work to do. We there was an offer from the DOI, wasn't there, that they just come along and resurface it, but everyone knows that that's not going to last at all. No. And of course, Port St Mary has the wagons coming through from the harbour, so we have some heavy, and as well as buses, we have some heavy wagons coming through there. It is just going to keep getting worse. The estimate at the last time that we thought was about £500,000 to do that stretch of road, and it would need to be closed for a period of probably 3 to 4 months.
Well, that figure's a few years old, isn't it?
That figure's old now.
Probably near £1 million, and that depends on whether they find coal tar under the road, as they have done elsewhere in Port St Mary. So they then have to find a disposal route for that as well.
So what's going to have to happen for it to be done?
Well, hopefully
you can't collapse, surely.
I think we're tempted to go down and dig it up ourselves if it gets any worse, just to make sure that they do actually have to move it up the list.
I wanted to plant little Christmas trees in each of the potholes. I'm still thinking that's a good idea. The tinsel on.
The DOI have said it's their top priority for a road capital project. So we want to get back and the last meeting we had, they didn't really have the answers as to where the money had gone. So we've organised another one for the near future. We don't have a date yet, but in order to find out, well, what has actually happened to the capital money, where is the scheme up to, and really keep the pressure on the department.
OK, here's a message in from Carrie, who just said, could you ask Juan Watterson, he talked about Manx Care as not showing, I think it was no visible signs of success.
No evidence of success,
so could you expand on that?
It wasn't every item on the mandate response, but if you take the mandate response that was laid before Tynwald, it's got an appendix to it with some red, amber, green ratings, and it's had the department's commentary and grading on each of the different mandate outcomes, and for quite a lot of them, the department had written that Manx Care hadn't been able to demonstrate any evidence in support of their stated achievements of the mandate, and that was where my comment came from, and it happened far too many times, and if anything, my criticism was that the department was far too generous in its marking.
And I'll pick up on this because I'm in the Department of Health with responsibility for looking at the mandate stuff, and I spend my entire time pretty much saying, where's the numbers, where's the data, show me how you can justify that. I did go back and speak with officers after your comment, and they went, okay, we can mark harder next time. There is a frustration, and I think the frustration is on both sides. So Manx Care don't have systems in place always to code things and grade things and to tell us the numbers of what they're doing in their activity, and then the Department of Health as the regulator and overseeing that is sat there saying, how do we know? And it's just giving us a summary that says this is all fine isn't good enough. We need data to back that up. So it is something that's being actively worked on, and I can you'll be happy to know. I've seen the new data coming through, and every time we see it, every month when we see some of this data coming through, there's more lines of data have been filled in, and there's more metrics that we're managing to get there. So I think it will improve.
One of the themes that comes through on Mannin Line is that people, we pay good public money for the Sir Jonathan Michaels report to split DHSC, create Manx Care. It was supposed to deliver savings, and yet we then have problems with GPs and dentists, waiting lists, bringing in the people from Scotland to do the surgery. So I think people just want to know, are we a victim of circumstance, or was it a wrong idea in the first place?
Sir Jonathan Michaels' report was never going to create savings. In fact, he predicted that healthcare spending had to go up, and it not only had to go up by the rate of inflation, it had to go up over
So at the moment they're technically underfunded.
Yes, they are underfunded according to the formula that Sir Jonathan Michaels set out.
According to that formula, I mean, the problem that I have, and I think the problem with most taxpayers have, is that they can't demonstrate that they're underfunded because we don't know what we're getting for our money. That's the frustration. I mean, it's you wouldn't think it was rocket science. I mean, the reports that we get from, I think, Synaptic on the waiting list initiatives, they tell you what you need to know. It says how many operations are being done, at what cost, and making sure that they're done in a safe way. That's the bones of what we need out of Manx Care, and at the moment we're just not getting even that sort of simple level of data.
And can you understand public frustration at that?
Well, I share it.
Yeah, so do I.
Okay, let's go to Stephen. You're live with Juan Watterson and Michelle Haywood. Stephen?
Good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, panel, and good afternoon, listeners. I wonder, could I just pose some questions for you? On the one hand, we've got a lot of initiatives on housing, but on the other hand, we haven't. They all seem to be targeted at new builds with MDC, etc. But certainly I know in your constituency, from my visits there, you've got the same problems at other older parts of the towns of the island, and that is unused properties. I believe the survey that came out was there's roughly 5,000 vacant properties on the island that need to be brought back into use. And one of the things that I think should be reintroduced, which is not, and I find it rather discriminatory that all the money can go to MDC at other types of that. We're giving, I think, 25 million of taxpayers' money via enterprise to fund property development. But for single property owners, there's no grant aid now. I think it was discontinued in 2013. So my question is, firstly, do you think that grant aid should be reintroduced to stimulate and try and bring back these 5,000 empty properties? That's the first point.
Joe Watterson?
Want to make?
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot in there. Yes, I agree with the figures. About 5,000 to 6,000 properties around the island that are deemed as, I think, being under-occupied rather than empty. And when you sort of start looking at things such as electricity usage, that number does sort of fall quite a bit. But it's still far too many, and it's something that needs to be considered in the context of our current housing crisis. Where I think I'm at is that the grant aid I think you're talking about was mainly for registered buildings and those in conservation areas rather than being generally available. There is still the Green Living Grant Scheme available to improve homes and make sure that they're better insulated and things like that. So that's still money that's around and available for homeowners as well. Where I think I have the greatest problem is the DFE have been putting money into things such as subsidising luxury apartment developments on Port Erin Promenade rather than putting in place the sticks to go with it. So there's an awful lot of incentives to build and do this and do that. There's not a lot of disincentives to do the wrong thing, and that's something that really government needs to catch up with in terms of sometimes it has to be a little bit meaner on developers rather than just giving them out the cash and make sure that the tools are available, whether that's rate increases for unoccupied sites and things like that. So there is a fairer balance to the taxpayer of carrot and stick in the overall development market.
Why do you think they're giving money to Tavere to develop 38 apartments on the old Ocean Castle?
Well, because it's insufficiently profitable for them, and it's more profitable for them to build on greenfield sites. I can understand the economics of that. Government's saying that this money is worth it in order to get the brownfield sites prioritised over the greenfield sites. Well, it'll all probably get done in the end if government meets its population target. I just think that the money that is being given out in support is more than is strictly necessary, because there aren't the sticks to match the carrots in terms of making it something that's not acceptable to sort of just sit on empty sites, unoccupied land or brownfield sites, and just have them sit there and not develop them.
Okay, next question, Stephen.
Well, so we've spoke about redistributing the cake in order to give it to more ordinary people. I don't think the Speaker really answered my question there. He gave what he thinks is right, but that we're all entitled to a different opinion. The second thing, I know the Speaker has spoken about this before, so how do we slice up the cake and make sure we're getting value for money? Because people I speak to are certainly very concerned that we're running the economy on a negative balance, and we're drawing down our reserves all the time. So, any ideas what tips or advice you would give to the Treasury Minister in order to try and reduce that need?
Well, the Treasury Minister's fed up of hearing from me on this, because it passes office every morning and it tends to crop up in conversation quite regularly. There are a number of things. I think government's not very good at deciding it's not going to do things, and it's going to stop doing things. So that's something that I think we have to make eye contact with at some point in the near future.
Well, we're not ambitious enough.
Well, I just don't think that it's kind of in government's DNA to say no. We've had it, generally we've had it so good for so long that it's always been if you have a problem, that you tend to throw money, people, consultants at the problem, rather than sort of try and knuckle down, make some hard choices about priorities and just get on with those. It's trying to keep as many people happy all the time, and there just isn't the money available anymore to do that. And there hasn't really been since the VAT bombshell about 2008. We've been sort of running at a loss ever since then, really, and it's coming home to bite. I mean, we were over 150 million in the red last year, and until the public and until members of Tynwald are more engaged in the budgeting and finances of the country rather than just sort of demanding more and more, then I think we are going to continue this sort of problem.
A quick word, Michelle Haywood.
I think it's one of those things that we fail to recognise sometimes, that the island just can't get the economies of scale to do things. And so although everyone says, well, we're going to benchmark ourselves against what the UK standards are, some of that is really incredibly hard to achieve here. And so expecting that we have services that match exactly what you'd get if you were across in England or Scotland is almost impossible to do. There is a higher cost associated with doing those things here, and we either need to compromise on what we expect, or we need to expect to pay more to get those services.
And do you think the government's been honest enough with the population as to our fiscal position?
Yeah, I think they're starting to be more honest and open about it than they have been in the past, but I don't think it's a fully rammed home yet.
I'm not entirely sure that's the case. I think in some cases we're going backwards. The last Light Blue book was published in 2021. That was the last time we actually had some detailed financial information about what was going on in departments on a sort of more granular level. They've stopped publishing that the last 2 years. We've had high-level management accounts, but it's really hard to know where the money's going in departments unless you ask a specific question about a specific area. So I would say in many ways we're going backwards rather than forwards on this.
Okay, we're running out of time, so do you have a final question, Stephen?
Well, there's many questions. The final one I'd like to end on, and it's more the constitutional aspect. Should it be possible for members of the court to reintroduce motions that have already been voted upon, and I'm talking on this occasion the Bishop's removal of his vote, but it could be on any other matter? Is it right that different members can reintroduce things on the same subject?
Okay, so I think this probably falls within my specialism. There is a rule that says you can't have another vote on the same thing in Tynwald. So we couldn't put another motion down in Tynwald about, say, the Bishop's vote within 6 months of the last one. What Mr Hooper has done is he has said, no, we're not going to have a motion in Tynwald. I'm going to introduce a bill to change the law. So that's a completely different thing. So that's not covered by the same sort of time constraints. So that's what's happening at the moment.
Okay, Stephen, thank you for that. Just a quick one. I'm just going to put this to Michelle Haywood. It's a Port Erin one, and it does concern the Ocean Castle in Port Erin. Quickly, if you would, do you support the use of public money to subsidise Ocean Castle? Because to describe Ocean Castle as a brownfield site is stretching the definition. It's a prime site, it's cleared, it's ready for development, and this would create an unfortunate precedent.
I think we've created a number of those precedents around, because it's not just Port Erin that's got that money. There's sites in Douglas as well. It was a discussion in Tynwald that this fund was going to be available to do that, and it is something that Comin have obviously decided that they think is going to generate an economic.
It's not a back street site, though, is it? I mean, it's a prime site.
Not. And in that regard, it does affect the streetscape along there, having that kind of almost like a bomb site in the middle of the prom up there, which should look so much nicer than it does.
Okay, back in just a few moments' time with Juan Watterson and Michelle Haywood from Rushen.
Problems with your spine and posture can have a serious effect on your quality of life, but a Line for Life spine clinic could help. If you're suffering from back pain, neck pain, headaches, their holistic scientific approach could find and treat the root cause of the problem for long-lasting relief. Touch A Line for Life now, or call 629 444. A Line for Life, the island's spine and posture clinic, here to make life better.
Walk through the northern lights into a land of ice and snow at Ramsey Garden Centre. Indoor and outdoor lights, a magical range of real and artificial trees, decorations, gifts and much more. Christmas at Ramsey Garden Centre, Albert Road.
The holidays remind us of family, love and the importance of planning for the future.
This festive season, we found peace of mind, all thanks to Man Benham.
Book an end-of-year consultation. Let's secure tomorrow today.
Have you been invited to take part in the Household Income and Expenditure Survey? It's one of the most important surveys for our island because the information you provide is vital data for our island's financial planning. It helps us calculate our VAT revenue from the UK. Plus, it gives us a better understanding of the financial strains on residents, so we can support those who are struggling. If you've been invited, please take part. Visit gov.im/HIES for more information.
Welcome to the Ramsey Park Hotel, where there's always a warm welcome and something to enjoy. The Dynamo's Mamma Mia tribute show is coming on Saturday the 6th of January from 7:30 till midnight with 2-course meal for only £45. Or dance till you drop and make a night of it with overnight stay and breakfast included for only £169 per couple. For more news on food offers and events, call 818 123 or visit the Ramsey Park Hotel on Facebook.
The Mannin Line, daily interaction, debate and exchange of ideas. Broadcast on Manx Radio from midday till 1, Monday to Friday.
And former MHK David North is with us. Faster Mike, good afternoon, David.
Faster Mike. And welcome to hear your discussions this morning. I'm in a sunny Connecticut, and I'm very interested. And Juan, good morning, and Michelle. It's good morning here anyway. And I the report of retired for over 20 years now, 20 odd years. And did you either of you read the report created by British Wind on where to locate windmills on the Isle of Man?
Okay, so carry on. Will your signals varying, David? So just it was there was a report done how long ago?
Over 25 years ago, in the late 90s, I was at the CPI.
Okay, and where did it say that any wind turbine should go?
The first place, well, it cost £50,000 in the MEA, commissioned it. And I'm just very surprised that we had another report done at a vast increase in cost, evidently. But it said that it should be at the Rushen mines was the number one choice, and Derby, if I remember rightly, was the number two choice.
And how serious was the report? I mean, was it part of a strategy, or were they just?
Well, it was done. It was a serious report because we wanted to put 6 windmills up. Unfortunately, I retired, and they ran out of money to do the windmill on other things. And but the point is, it was done by British Wind, if I remember rightly, and cost £50,000. It was a serious study of the whole of the Isle of Man as to where they should go. Now, I understand that the conditions of that you can't put windmills up on peat these days, and I'm told you can't put them over old mine working. But I'm suspicious of that condition because I think that applies to coal mines in the United Kingdom and things like that. So whether it applies to Russian mines, I don't know.
Okay, all right, David, just quickly, Juan Watterson.
Yeah, I think it was two things. The first thing is that they don't know how big the mine shafts are or where they are, which was a significant consideration. And also consider about when you dig down. I mean, I don't know if I've forgotten what the report from the 90s, whether it was envisaging something quite as big as we're talking about today, and the sort of the significant area that needs to be taken up in terms of the concrete needs to go down to hold these things up. I think the report at that point was looking at far smaller wind turbines, and that difference is also leads to different considerations around leachate of mine workings and other things that will end up going down the Foxdale River in the Neb into Peel.
Okay, all right. Now, thanks to David North, former MHK, former Minister for Tynwald, of course, but Michelle Haywood, we're just about out of time. On a scale of 1 to 10, how soon and how certain are you that the wind farm will be going ahead at Eristane and Scards?
There's lots of hoops to get through yet. The EIAs are the really, really critical bit now to evaluate all of that. And if it fails at that point, because we can't mitigate the damage that it's going to cause, then it fails.
Okay. All right, thanks for being with us today. We didn't even get on to the cycle lanes. Anyway, back tomorrow.
WINT